This cannot go on forever, explaining the U.S. debt crisis in simple terms. By Tyler Durden. Sunday, June 23, 2024, 1 p.m. Submitted by QTR's Fringe Finance. James Lavish, CFA, is a seasoned professional in institutional investing and risk management with over 2 decades of experience. He is currently the managing partner of the Bitcoin Opportunity Fund, which focuses on public and private investments in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Lavish is recognized for his work in educating others about financial fundamentals through his newsletter, The Informationist, which simplifies complex financial concepts for a broad audience. On my talk with him last week, I asked him to lay out, in simple terms, exactly just how screwed the U.S. economy is. James opened by talking about the fact that the numbers and what consumers are feeling are like having 2 different economies. You're seeing 2 economies out there. And that's causing a lot of confusion out there. You hear the Fed talking about inflation. You hear the White House saying they've got inflation tackled. You hear businesses saying that they're struggling. You hear consumers saying that they're struggling. They can't stand the inflation, the prices. They can't keep up. But yet you see these numbers that are coming out that seem to be okay. They're conflicting. Speaker medium volume. Listen to the audio of this full hour-long interview here. He added, you're getting unemployment numbers that are conflicting with the actual job numbers. You're getting pricing that is conflicting. If you go to the grocery store, you're looking at the prices, you're saying there's no way this is up 3.2% from last year. This is up 10, 12, 15%. So there's confusion out there. He then went on to try and explain why this is. The confusion, Chris, is that you've got pockets of recession, which are natural when you have the Fed raise rates so quickly and hold them there for so long. And look, 5.5% is not an incredibly high rate on interest rates on the Fed funds rate historically. But when you raise rates from just over 0%, where they were holding for a decade, to 5%, it's massive because we've become incredibly indebted in this nation, which we're going to touch on quite a bit here. But the most important thing to understand is why people are asking, if the Fed has raised rates so steeply, why is the inflation rate not come down? Why is it not back to the 2% or under 2% target? And the answer is that it's because the government is spending wildly, like so incredibly irresponsibly, that it's causing what we're calling fiscal dominance, meaning fiscal spending is dominating the Fed's attempt to tackle inflation by raising rates. And so you're seeing pockets of recession, and people are feeling it. People are feeling it in their pocketbooks and their wallets, he continued. James went on to describe the era of fiscal dominance we are entering. So what's happening is it's the federal spending. It's the government spending so much money that you're seeing areas of deep recession. There's just no question about it. Commercial real estate has a problem, and that means regional banks have a problem. The Fed is all over this. The regional Federal Reserve banks are all over this. They are working with these community banks to make sure that they don't go under. And we've already seen them go under. We saw Silicon Valley go under. That's a little bit of a different situation that didn't have to do with commercial real estate, but that had to do with exactly what you talked about. So you have rates that rise catastrophically on a meteoric pace. He also talked about how the rise in rates has affected treasuries on corporate balance sheets. Treasuries were considered riskless because in the last 15 years, they were riskless. If you owned a treasury, there was pretty much a certainty that the price of that treasury would just gravitate to par, and you would mature and get your maturity payment and all the coupons along the way. However, when you raise interest rates from 0.025% to 5.5% on a bond with a 30-year duration, you're basically saying that if you went to try to sell that treasury that you own, let's say a 1.5% treasury with a 30-year yield, and it's yielding 1.5%, and you try to sell that in the market, that's a difference of 4% annually for that bond. So if this thing still has 7, 8, 10, or 15 years of duration on it, that means you're marking this bond down significantly. It's not just a few percent. James pointed out that protecting the market is crucial at this stage. The economy is driven by this, and it's been shown for the last decade that the stock market really is a large part of the economy. It's not just because of tax receipts off of capital gains, but because people look at their net worth and see their net worth go up in their stocks. They're willing to spend more of their discretionary income rather than saving it because they think, oh, well, look, my net worth is up 20%, 30%, 40% in the last couple of years. I'm fine. I'm going to go ahead and spend my paycheck. I'm not going to put any more money into the market. I'm good. And so it just drives the economy. Fire 80% off. Since it's officially summer, I'm going to offer up my largest discount of the year for Fringe Finance. Get 80% off forever. Lavish explains that any crisis now will be kicked up to the sovereign level for the first time in recent history. We have the tech bubble, and that's kind of kicked up to the banks. Then we continue on, and we've got this risk, this debt indebtedness, that's now kicked up to the banks. And now we're coming on the great financial crisis with the housing market. The housing bubble and all of these banks holding this mortgage paper, which is just garbage, end up going under. Where does it get kicked? It gets kicked up to the federal level. And now it's sitting on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. Flash forward to 2020, and you've got the lockdowns that caused the entire economy to grind to a halt. The government, in a panic, went and monetized $6 trillion of debt. So now you've got a Fed balance sheet that's holding more treasuries than anybody else in the world. What's going on today is that the problem is we have a fiscal policy that is absolutely unimaginably irresponsible, he says. We're running $2 trillion deficits at a time that we're not even in a recession. All this matters because the indebtedness and the risk have been kicked all the way up to the sovereign level. The punchline is that if you have a collapse of the economy, it's the sovereign level that must stomach it completely now. And then he lays out the case bare. We can walk through the numbers, but the bottom line is that the US government and the Treasury have entered a debt spiral. We now have $34.7 trillion of debt, which is over 120% of GDP. If you're a country with debt over 120% of GDP, your fiat currency fails. This is where we're at, and we're just spending and spending and spending. What happens if you get into a recession? Your tax revenues drop precipitously, and your spending rises at a similar rate because of all your social programs like unemployment and wage security. You could wind up having a deficit that's not $2 trillion but could be $3, $4, $5, or even $6 trillion if it gets bad enough. Just imagine that. Suddenly, we are adding over 10% to our debt in a year, maybe 20% in a year. That is the debt spiral. He continues, we can't do that because the rest of the world will turn around and look at our bonds and say, why would I buy those bonds if they have to keep issuing new bonds to pay me for my bond? We are in a situation where we have to continually issue more and more debt. This is rising exponentially, and there really is no way out. That's the problem. Modern monetary theory proponents think it's just driving the economy, there's no big deal. However, when the music stops and people stop having confidence in the US Treasury, that feeds into the US dollar. That's when you get into a problem. Why does that happen? It happens because of inflation. It all goes back to this central problem, this constant and relentless manipulation of the monetary system through central banks that create inflation. That is a soft default on that debt every single day because the dollars you're getting paid back in the future are worth less than when you lent them out to the government initially. So, who wants to lend the US Treasury dollars for 30 years when they know that inflation only has to go up to continue the charade? They get into what's called a debt spiral. They can't get out of it. And this is where we are. So what is the option for the US government if they continue to borrow? What does that mean? Well, that means that they must have inflation. There absolutely is no way around it. That inflation allows GDP to grow nominally. Remember that $28.5 trillion number? That has to go up. Nominally meaning just in terms of dollars, not inflation adjusted. When you have more dollars in the system, it creates more GDP because there's more dollars. And so that GDP number goes up. The productivity number goes up. But it's fake. It's not more stuff. It's just stuff that's more expensive. So there are more dollars in the system. And when you go to pay down that debt in the future, you're paying it down with dollars that are cheaper, that are worth less. This is called the debasement of the US dollar. The US dollar gets worth less and less and less every single year. He concludes, and so this is the challenge. The US government absolutely must have negative real rates. What do I mean by that? That means they must have coupons on their treasuries that are lower than the inflation rate, and they have to have this in perpetuity. That's the only way they can keep this charade going. It won't go on forever. Make no mistake, this cannot go on forever. You can listen to the full hour-long interview, including insights on when the market cracks, ugly-looking treasury auctions and more, at this link. QTR's disclaimer. Please read my full legal disclaimer on my About page here. This post represents my opinions only. In addition, please understand I am an idiot and often get things wrong and lose money. I may own or transact in any names mentioned in this piece at any time without warning. Contributor posts and aggregated posts have been hand-selected by me, have not been fact-checked and are the opinions of their authors. They are either submitted to QTR by their author, reprinted under a Creative Commons license. with my best effort to uphold what the license asks, or with the permission of the author. This is not a recommendation to buy or sell any stocks or securities, just my opinions. I often lose money on positions I trade/invest in. I may add any name mentioned in this article and sell any name mentioned in this piece at any time, without further warning. None of this is a solicitation to buy or sell securities. These positions can change immediately as soon as I publish this, with or without notice. You are on your own. Do not make decisions based on my blog. I exist on the fringe. The publisher does not guarantee the accuracy or completeness of the information provided in this page. These are not the opinions of any of my employers, partners, or associates. I did my best to be honest about my disclosures but can't guarantee I am right. I write these posts after a couple beers sometimes. I edit after my posts are published because I'm impatient and lazy, so if you see a typo, check back in a half hour. Also, I just straight up get shit wrong a lot. I mention it twice because it's that important. 64-371232. More market stories on Zero Hedge. This is going to be far worse than the Great Depression. Unhinged Jamal Bowman goes on profanity-laden rant at Bronx rally with AOC. Mar audience silenced after Andrew Cuomo admits NYC Trump trial should have never happened. Show comments. Discrimination notice. Privacy policy. Ad. This is going to be far worse than the Great Depression. By Tyler Durden. Sunday, June 23, 2024, 6:50 p.m. Via Greg Hunter's USAWatchdog.com. Financial writer and precious metals broker Bill Holter has been documenting all the unpayable debt that has been building up in the financial system like cancer. The latest black hole of default is coming from a big bank in Japan. Norinchukin Bank is selling $63 billion in treasuries and other sovereign bonds to stay afloat. Then there is recent news announced by the FDIC that 63 U.S. banks, the names are being kept secret, have more than $500 billion in losses, and let's not forget about the trillions in losses sitting on the books of European banks ready to suck the world into a black debt hole. This is just a few of many on a long list of destabilizing problems that can tank the entire over-indebted financial system. Holter warns, the list is so long. It could be a banking problem. It could be a derivatives problem. It could be a derivatives problem in the stock market, the bond market, and you could see a failure to deliver in silver. Some type of warfare could crash the system. You could see warfare in Ukraine, Israel, or Taiwan. The system is so unstable, at this point, it could be anything that could bring it down. Unpayable debt is not just a US problem. This is all over the world. Central banks are having to issue huge amounts of debt because we are in the exponential decay phase. We are exactly where Richard Russell said we would be 20 years ago. It's inflate or die, and the only way to inflate is to create more money supply. Add to that the $10 trillion in debt the US government has to roll over by the end of the year. Meanwhile, the US government piles on $1 trillion in new debt every 100 days. What could go wrong? Holter said the last time he was on USAW that there was a little less than a 50% chance we would even have an election. Now, he predicts it is more likely there will be number 2024 presidential election. Holter says, there is no way the system, as it is now, survives. It's mathematically impossible. So, if it is mathematically impossible, are they going to blow smoke up until the day it blows up? Or are they going to do something to blow it up and then say our programs and policies were working except for XYZ this or whatever? They have to kick the table over. They cannot allow the table to fall over on its own because then there is going to be finger pointing. To avoid the finger pointing, they have got to kick the table over. Holter also thinks gold is going to exponential numbers to back all the debt the USA has. If you go with the 8,030 tons of gold the government claims is in Fort Knox, you will need a dollar price of gold at $125,000 per ounce for 100% gold backing of the dollar. Holter also says, the dollar is being pushed out of the global financial system. Demand for dollars is shrinking at a time when borrowing demand is rising. This is going to be a disaster for America and anyone holding dollars in the future. In closing, Holter says, the financial collapse that is coming will be worse than anything we have ever experienced. This is going to be far worse than the Great Depression simply because society itself is far worse. Back in the Great Depression, you had neighbors helping neighbors. Today you will have neighbors picking on other neighbors like vultures. There is much more in the 51-minute interview. Join Greg Hunter as he goes one-on-one with financial writer and precious metals expert Bill Holter for June 22nd, 24. To donate to usawatchdog.com, click here. Bill Holter's website just keep getting more and more viewers, and it's still free. It's called billholter.com.
Smoking is one of the most dangerous addictions in the world, and while you lie to yourself that you'll be able to quit any time, severe complications, often deadly, are quite.
One simple but brilliant trick to cool your home in 90 seconds. Tired of hot and stuffy rooms during summer? This genius way to cool any room in 90 seconds for almost zero cost is taking over the market like crazy in the US. An ingenious college kid from Phoenix just destroyed the billion-dollar AC industry by building a device that can cool down any room in record time. Martin designed the invention after budget cuts left his school with a broken aircon system in sweltering hot summers. He and his fellow classmates had to study for their exams in 95-degree temperatures. And when their plea for a new AC system fell on deaf ears, Martin decided.
I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to usawatchdog.com. A few weeks ago, I had Ed Dowd on. A money manager, worked for BlackRock for years, and he turned $2 billion into $14 billion. And I was talking about the economy, and I said, what could blow it up? What could completely blow the economy up? The unforeseen thing that most people aren't thinking about. He goes, Japan. Japan's got a lot of problems. Well, this past week, this happened. The music just stopped is the headline. Japan banking giant Norinchukin to liquidate $63 billion in treasuries and European bonds to plug massive unrealized losses. And I thought of a couple of different people. Bill Holter is one of them. Bill Holter, thanks for joining us today on usawatchdog.com and to talk about this. This apparently to the writer of this article and other people that this is a big deal. Why?
Well, thanks for having me, Greg. It just shows that it's spreading. We know that there's a huge commercial real estate problem in the U.S. I mean, just look around. You're seeing real estate underwater. You're seeing mortgage-backed debt underwater. We know the same thing has happened in China. China has a huge real estate problem, and now Japan is joining the party. And in that article, they asked the question, is this going to lead to other banks front-running that bank that needs to raise $63 billion? And the answer is obviously yes. I mean, they are not the only bank in Japan that's had a problem.
In other words, Japan is joining the bank, commercial real estate, insolvency problem.
Right, exactly. It's a global margin call is what it is.
I wanted to bring this up here. I know we're freezing today. I don't know why that is, but anyway, I just want to bring this up here. FDIC problem. Remember this? This happened at the beginning of June, and and it was like this cutesy pie thing they did. Well, there's 63 banks now on watch in 2024, and it's withholding who the insolvent banks are. The FDIC, which we pay taxes to basically oversee the banking industry, they know of 63 insolvent banks. They say it's a watch list, and they are withholding. And then with this eye-popping number, $517 billion in unrealized losses, threatening the stability of the 63 banks. I mean, aren't all these banks going to need to raise capital as well?
Yeah, they will. They will, and more than likely, it's more banks than just those 63 banks. And I know for a fact it's at least one bank more than those 63 banks, and that would be the Federal Reserve itself, because they're sitting on $165 billion in unrealized losses.
Wow, that's unbelievable. I know you're frozen here, so I'm just going to kind of play along here. We'll just have this interview. And because I want your analysis on this, they whacked the daylights out of gold and silver, $40, and I always wonder. This is Saturday. They always do this on a Friday, and I always wonder what's up coming up Monday if they're hitting gold and silver that hard. Let's just go ahead and go full screen here on the gold chart. Here it is now. This is before they whacked the daylights out. It's at that what is it, 2369. You know, they drove it down from here. Why? What does this tell you about what's going on with gold? Or maybe better put, how about the silver chart? What does this tell you about what's going on with silver? This is silver.
Well, it tells me from a timing standpoint, it's almost like they had to put the hammer on gold and silver, otherwise they're going higher. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the chart, you'll see the moving average convergence divergence. And if you go back to last time I was on, was right after I put an article out on, I think it was May 11th or 12th. And I talked about that moving average convergence divergence looked like it was going to cross over, and it did in fact cross over, and we broke through $30. We traded up to, I think, $32.50 or thereabouts. Gold had a pullback from its highs of about 5%, and silver has had every bit of 10%, maybe 10%, and a little bit plus. So, you know, and that's typical because silver is typically, you know, more volatile both upwards and downwards versus silver. But both of those charts, if you look on the bottom right-hand corner, you've got a hook on the MACD starting to form. And I mean, that doesn't tell you anything about long term, but it does tell you something about the next 3 to 6 to 8 weeks.
You're talking about right in here. Hold on. You're talking about this little hook right there. Right exactly. Here.
When the black line, yes.
Same
when
thing.
The black line crosses the red line, then you have a short-term change in direction. And when I came on back in early May or mid-May, I suggested that crossover would lead to new highs in gold, a breakout over $30 on silver, and that did happen. We got frothy. We got to $32.50. I think gold got to what, $24.50. And here we are at what, $23.20, $23.30 thereabouts on gold, and call it $29.50 in silver.
Close enough.
That with the MACDs crossing over or trying to cross over, there's still a little bit of work to do. It may take Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this coming week. But even going sideways from here, those lines will cross. And once they cross, then you have traders that will step up and start chasing the momentum. So just from a short-term timing standpoint, silver, if you could pull that silver chart back up, silver's bounced pretty hard yesterday. It was up $1 yesterday, and it bounced right off that $29 level, which is exactly where it should start to bounce.
Right here.
Because you've got the support. If you go back to April, you can see we got up to almost $29. So we came down to test that area, and then we landed and tested the 50-day moving average. And you can see that the white spike on the far right, that was yesterday's move, and today's move wiped it out. So we're back down to that line. But as long as this line holds and the MACDs cross, we're going through $32.50.
Wow.
And my guess would be we'll probably get to this next move, we'll probably go to, I don't know, anywhere between $34 and $37 before we get another pullback.
And when I talked to you on the phone to book you for this interview, I said, you know, this petrodollar, poof, nobody's talking about it. It's like, it's okay. I don't know how they're ever going to have that back. I mean, they joined the BRICS. They're not going to exclusively sell Saudi oil in dollars any longer. And then you were talking, you said, and this is something that really grabbed me, you said, there are so many ways for this thing to collapse. It's not even funny, and I don't know if we'll even make it 30, 60, 90 days. Tell me what you mean by there's so many ways for this to collapse. It's not even funny. How many ways could this collapse? What are the avenues of this could collapse? Obviously, Japanese insolvent banks. Obviously, U.S. insolvent banks that the FDIC is hiding from the public. Tell me about what you see in terms of nuclear subs off the east coast of America, loaded with hypersonic missiles.
Well, I mean, I would just say keep going, Greg. I mean, the list is so long. I mean, it could be a banking problem. It could be a derivatives problem in anything. It could be a derivatives problem in the stock market, the bond market. You could see a failure to deliver in for silver. You could see some type of warfare, whether it be Ukraine, whether it be Israel, whether it be Taiwan. I mean, the system is so unstable at this point that it could be anything.
Well, I mean, the amount of debt they're acquiring is, they say it's the overt number. What they admit to, what the number everybody's talking about, is $1 trillion every 90 to 100 days. Dowd brought this up. I think you brought this up. Rubino has brought this up. I mean, it's a no number. And then I find out from another source of mine that says, oh, it's worse than that. It's $1 trillion every 40 days. It's stunning. How? I mean, we're on the exponential. Oh, here we are. Here we are. What Rob Kirby talked about, the late great Rob Kirby, who's now dead. This is the exponential curve. This is the debt. This is 2020 right here, and doing. I mean, it's going straight up. This is our debt, which is now more than a defense budget.
Right, and it's not the that's the interest expense is what that is.
Yes.
But it's not just a U.S. problem. I mean, this is all over the world. Central banks and sovereign treasuries are having to issue, huge amounts of debt because we're in the exponential decay phase, if you want to call it that. We're exactly where Richard Russell 10, 20 years ago said we would be: inflate or die. And the only way to inflate is to create more money supply, and the only way to do that is to create more debt, because fiat currency is created by the issuance of debt. It's no longer, the printing press that the Weimar Germany had.
Well, and then another scary thing, no debate, no articles on it, no interviews with politicians, no televised C-SPAN debates on the House floor or the Senate floor. They want to institute the draft in the House, and they want to draft women in the Senate. If that doesn't tell you we're close to... So, wait. It's going to be so bad, you got to draft women. Is this what you're reading it, or am I just over the top here?
I have a little bit of a different take on it. Obviously, if they're wanting to institute a draft, they want to fill up the military. Maybe they've got, already have plans to do something somewhere where they need boots on the ground. My take on it is that if you look at the amount of young men that have joined the Army, the Marines, the Navy, etc., those numbers are way, way, way down. And I think it's probably a function of if you want to call them conservative or patriotic young men, are looking at generals that are wearing dresses and saying, screw this, I'm not going to a fag unit. The other thing is, then you've got another part of the population that is, is and never will be battle ready, so they're not going to join. So the numbers that they've had, the recruit numbers, have been appalling. So it's almost like they have to institute a draft. Greg, one other thing I want to mention. I do want to mention this, and I've talked about this with you, I think, probably a couple times now. And every day that goes by, I believe there's a lesser and lesser chance that we're actually going to have an election. So you could add to your list that we were just talking about earlier of some type of false flag that would create the conditions where they could say, or where they could let me put in quotes, plausibly say we can't have an election. I mean, look what happened in Ukraine. Zelensky is now president. They canceled the election. So, what is he? Dictator president? I mean, I don't even know what you'd call it. But they did not have the election when they were supposed to have it because, we're at war, we can't do it. So, add a false flag to that list that we were talking about earlier.
Boy, well, we just had somebody come on. The Congress was talking about how this is not a. I'm looking for it here. This is not a he said, with Christopher Wray coming on every few months in front of Congress and testifying that this is not a conspiracy theory. We're at some point going to be hit with with some sort of attack because the border's wide open. You just had, I think it was Nicaragua, cancel all the visas for China because they're coming into their country and poof, they're gone. And a bunch of Chinese are coming into Nicaragua and coming across our southern border. Are we crazy? And what Christopher Wray's a nut job. He's basically arresting 1,400 at least J6 people, and he's complaining and warning about all these these hackers from China and people from Hamas and Muslim radical terrorists and who's he going after? People from J6. They've just reclassified Trump supporters as potential terrorists. But we're in trouble here, aren't we?
Well, yeah. If you're white, Christian, conservative, you're a terrorist. That's what they they consider you a terrorist. And the bottom line is, if he's worried about terrorism, we'll close the borders. Just shut the borders. Don't allow anyone in. And start deporting the ones that have already crossed in. That's simple. That's common logic, which there is none in Washington anymore.
Well, Martin Armstrong said that they want this to happen. They want to blow stuff up. It was Mike Turner at the House Intelligence Chair saying that to CBS News, no longer speculative and no longer hypothetical in lieu of the comments made by FBI Director Chris Wray in multiple committee meetings in the past 6 months. He's right about that. I reported it every time. I'm thinking, why is he sounding the alarm? Why are they doing this? To your point, we're back to your point. I don't know if there's going to be an election. And
that's what I was going to say is, we're talking about the border now. And if you look at it from just a complete broad standpoint, mathematically, this thing comes down. There's absolutely no way the system as it is now survives. It's mathematically impossible. So if it's mathematically impossible, are they going to, blow smoke up your rear end up until the day that it blows up? Or are they going to do something to blow it up and say, well, our programs, policies were working, except for, this, XYZ, whatever it happens to be. They have to kick the table over, Greg. They cannot allow the table to fall over on its own, because then there's going to be finger pointing. So in order to avoid the finger pointing, they've got to kick the table over. And I think it will be done before the election, because it's pretty clear with the polls now. It's too wide to cheat. It's too big of a margin, and if those in power lose power, then justice will come after them after the new administration comes in. So they cannot allow a transfer of power.
Which is frightening. And I got to tell you, this is a number I've had up. I've been doing this for months. I've talked about this on the Weekly News Wrap-Up. And what I've noticed is that all media won't touch me on this. Okay, they won't touch it. Mainstream media won't touch me. Trolls won't come after me. And it's this number here, and I've written it in text. I've talked about it extensively, and this backs up what you're saying. That it's so big that it can't be. And both my sources, one of them is Martin Armstrong, another one works for big tech, and if I disclosed who this person was, male or female, I'd get fired. I said, so they know this. Yes, They don't think it's tied. They don't think it's close. They don't think Biden's down by a few points. They don't think this garbage, where they, oh, look, Biden's winning now. No. But here's what they do know. Biden's true approval rating is 6 to 7%, and Martin Armstrong is my known source. I have another source to back up exactly that metric, between 6 and 7%. That's the real number. And I won't get any trolls. I won't have anybody call BS on it. I won't have anybody write about it back and forth. They don't want it found in search.
Right.
And I'm surprised Bannon doesn't pick this up. I'm surprised Tucker Carlson doesn't pick this up. I mean, my source is I have two sources. One of them is Martin Armstrong, who is in demand all over the world for geopolitical and financial cycle work and expertise. He's no slow-mo. And then another one is I know this person. It's not somebody just writes me. I know this person. It's unbelievable. And you think they know, and this makes it dangerous. I mean, if you have a 6 to 7% approval rate, do you think that's I think it's a true number. And if you have that bad of a number, you're saying it's gonna make things crazy. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. And plus, we have a debate coming up this week where there's no telling how this thing's going to work out. And Greg, I do want to talk about something else. We didn't talk about this prior to the interview. And it goes back to when I say the system mathematically impossible to continue. If you look at the gold that we supposedly have in Fort Knox, and it's supposed to be 8,300. There's not been an audit since the 1950s, but let's just assume that there is 8,300 tons of gold. That's only $600 billion. Our deficit is $2 trillion for 1 year. Do you see the irony in that?
No, yes, I see the irony. And here we're back to when you and you've done it yourself, and Jim Sinclair. And listen, I'll tell you something else. Jim Rickards has brought this same computation up. And, it depends on how you want to value gold. It's going to be 20%. It's going to be 40%. He was talking about, well, you have to have, 80,000 an ounce. You've said, well, we've got X amount of debt and X amount of gold. Let's assume it's 8,300 tons. All right, what is it? 8,300 tons, 8,000 tons, right?
Right.
Okay, so
yes.
Let's just assume that's a real number. Now, a lot of people say it's not, but let's assume it is. What would the price of gold have to be to equalize the debt? This is what Jim Sinclair did back in 1979, 1980, going, we have X amount of gold. How much would the price have to be? And he came up with $900 an ounce. And I think I heard him say this, that it topped out at 875. At 875. And so it didn't go to 900, but almost. And I remember in 1973, what was gold? $41 an ounce or something?
Yeah, and the reason it didn't go to $900 an ounce is because Jim hit the sell button. He had the largest gold futures position in the world at the time. And he hit the sell button at 875.
Wow.
I think gold that day was down $75 by the end of the day. And Jim packed his bags, and you didn't hear from him again until roughly the year 2000.
Yeah. Jim Sinclair, they got the term Mr. Gold.
Yeah, and the number, by the way, Greg, if you take the 8,300 tons, if that had to back our 35 trillion in debt, it's just north of 125,000 an ounce.
Holy
now, the
cow.
better question, here's the better question, and I think it's a bigger question. It's pretty clear that, the BRICS are going to bring forth a new currency that they want to settle trade in. And they've said that gold will be one of the backing components. I'd like I'm going to do the math at some point. There's a lot of variables we don't know yet, such as the total supply of whatever the BRICS currency is. But once we can figure out, how much currency is out there, if they use a 20 or even as as high as 40. I don't think you'll see higher than a 40% backing. But if they backed the trade currency with a 20 to 40% backing of gold, there's nowhere near enough gold on the planet to do that at current prices. I mean, you could have 1 ounce backing, backing everything if that 1 ounce was worth, $100 trillion or whatever. So the argument has always been, oh, well, you can't use gold to settle trade because there's not enough of it. And that's completely wrong. The problem is it's not priced correctly to be able to back trade. And let me just add one more thing to that, Greg. Okay, so assuming that they come out with a trade currency, there is a gold backing. We know that China, and I did this, I think probably 6 years ago, with you, I talked about it. Just on the back of a napkin back then, I could show you that China had already amassed 25,000 tons, basically triple what the United States says they have. And China here, they're officially 2,700 tons or 2,900 tons. If it turns out that China's sitting on 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 tons, and they back, they ratio back the new currency at 20% or 40% or whatever the number happens to be, do you not think that since China has the biggest gold hoard in the history of history, by far, bar none, do you not think that they're going to want to mark the price up to the moon?
Oh my gosh. That's the big question is, everybody's asking is when? Well, we're getting closer to when.
Well, when people ask me when, I just tell them open your eyes. It's happening right before your eyes. I mean, the dollar is moving out of the system. It's not moving into the system. The dollar is being pushed out of the system. Fewer and fewer countries are using dollars to settle trade. And that was the big demand for the last, 40, 50 years, was the use of dollars to settle trade. And that is, without a doubt, that is waning.
And people had to have dollars to buy oil. And now they're like,
correct.
Wait, I can buy oil in a rupee? Yes. I can buy oil in euros? Yes. I can buy oil in rubles? Sure. I can buy oil in real? Yes. I mean, what do you need dollars for?
Well, we're going to need dollars to transact business inside the U.S. borders. Now, that brings something up. Also, we may end up with an inside currency and an outside trade currency. Who knows? But the dollar as is today, within a year or 2 years, will certainly not be the same currency. And you're bringing up dollars for oil. Somebody sent me an article, or actually an interview, of someone who says that people are running around saying the 50-year agreement ended. Well, yeah, it's 50 years after the fact, and I don't know whether or not there's the agreement that we've seen in writing is real or not real, or whether this guy's right in saying that no, there never was a formal deal. But you do know that Saudi Arabia, publicly said many times that we will only take dollars for oil, and we also know that they bought boatloads of treasury securities, and that was part of what we understood the deal to be, was that they would take profits from oil and fund the U.S. deficits. It just looks to me, well, and if you go back 2 years, not quite 2 years ago, I think it was October of 22, Saudi Arabia made the public statement that they would take other currencies other than dollars for oil. And to me, whether there was a formal agreement or not formal agreement for Saudi Arabia's protection or whatever, I don't think it matters. I think it matters what they're saying publicly, that they will accept other currencies other than strictly dollars, because that right there tells you the demand for dollars is shrinking at a time when the demand to borrow by the U.S. Treasury is off the charts. I mean, who is going to lend to the U.S. Treasury? And in the end, it's going to be the lender of last and only resort, the Federal Reserve, which now happens to be joined at the hip with the Treasury. They've been merged.
What's going to happen to the value of the dollar when the world goes, wow, you're eating your own feces. You're eating your own junk. You're eating your own debt. What's going to happen when the world says, wow, who's funding this? Oh, you are. What's going to happen to the dollar?
Well, that's pretty easy, because what will happen is foreigners will say, yeah, we'll trade you this, we'll ship this, ship that, whatever, but we're not taking dollars. So somehow we're going to have to come up with something other than dollars to trade with. And maybe it's something real for real. Maybe it's grain for steel or whatever. I mean, who knows? But the point being, once foreign nations begin to refuse acceptance of the dollar, then you're in the hyperinflation phase, and you're also in the phase of massive shortages, because we don't make anything here, we import everything. So if the exporters say, no, we're not taking your dollars, the imports dry up, and it's no longer point and click on Amazon to get something delivered the next day. I mean, you may not ever get it delivered because it's something that's not made in the U.S., and the producer refuses to accept dollars.
Wow, you think that day's coming?
Oh, without a doubt.
They're talking about monetizing all public lands and going through Wall Street. The crooks there, they haven't stolen enough. They want a bill in Congress to monetize quietly, just like the draft, just like all the other awful stuff they do. They'll pass it on a Friday, and they'll go home and take their payoffs and go look at their kiddie porn and fly off to have sex with children. That's what Lieutenant Colonel Michael Flynn said, that lots of people in Congress go overseas to have sex with children. He said it. The former head of the DIA, Michael Flynn. And so, but they're talking about basically securitizing all billions and millions of acres of public land. Sell us out from within, so they all make their paycheck, and America is no longer America. It's it's America stand, divvied up and cut up and sold off to all these weasels, right?
Do you know why?
Tell me.
It's the last thing. It's the last thing that they can collateralize. They've run out of collateral.
Ooh. Explain.
Well, I mean, we have become a financialized nation, a financialized world. And everything, there has to be, in order for credit to be issued, there has to be collateral. And everything's borrowed against now. There's no free collateral left. So why not take the lands and collateralize those and kick the can down the road 2 or 3 years?
Well, that would be, that's just more treason. We'd be better off if we just defaulted and started over. Oh, but you can't do that when you're bribed by China. You can't do that when you're Biden, you're bribed, and all the other rhinos that are bribed, and all the other Democrats that are bribed, and all of them that have kiddie porn that they're in the shots with, the kids, those guys. Michael Flynn said that. I'm just telling you what Michael Flynn said. He said this a few months ago, that many members of Congress fly overseas to have sex with children. You don't think they're on camera doing that, do you? You don't think somebody got them on camera doing that, do you?
My guess is,
yes.
Everybody is. Yeah, I mean, everybody is impaired.
Yeah, everybody's all these people that they're all Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, they're all being blackmailed.
They're all being blackmailed. It's awful. That's where we are today. So what So, given the idea here that the dollar is just days are numbered, I guess would that be a good way to say it? The dollar's buying power days, the way it is now, are numbered. Would that be a good way to say it?
Yeah, and I mean the reason being, the amount of debt outstanding can never be paid in current terms, in current values. The only way to pay back would be to pay back a much smaller percentage, and the way to do that is just to devalue the currency. I mean, this is nothing new, but what's new is the dollar is the reserve currency of the world, and that's the problem, because all these central banks all over the world hold dollars. The whole financial system worldwide is held up basically by the dollar, by treasuries. I mean, that is the foundation to the financial world. And now you're talking about either a mass devaluation or an event where the dollar actually goes away and gets reissued by something new.
If this is going to be messy, sloppy, painful, people who think, oh, hey, I'm retired, sure. Yes, we owe you some money. Your retirement check, your $3,000 a month will now buy you a loaf of bread and a can of coffee at Schnucks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they have stated, when I say they, the WEF, the globalists have stated that they want to depopulate the planet. Well, how, the best way to depopulate the planet is to starve people. And how do you starve them? You make it so they don't have any money, any capital, and there's your great taking. You'll own nothing. And I guess be happy that we're giving you food. But that's the bottom line, is that, they're attacking the food supply. They're going to globally take people's assets from banks, brokers, insurance companies, etc., and you're going to have a population that can't afford food. They're going to die off. It's going to be a mass die-off.
Of course, just to go along with that, we do have this little bioweapon problem that we have now. This is a University of Illinois law professor, Francis Boyd, calls it a bioweapon. A weapon of mass destruction. Right. He's on the record. He wrote the 1989 Bioweapons Act. That's one way to do it. Of course, they keep vaccinating people because it's good for you, and it's awful. And so we're under complete and total attack. It seems to me. It seems like we, the people, and most of them are sleeping and worried about the NFL and Caitlin Clark, and she got elbowed, and they're just, look over here, look over here, look over here. Where should people be looking?
Well, I think to know what's actually happening, if you look at the price of gold, if you look at foreign exchange, and if you look at credit markets will tell you the story. And we talked about this, I think, last time, is that ultimately rates are going higher, they're not going lower. Yes, the Fed will at some point cut rates. They'll probably be forced by something snapping in the system to cut rates. But ultimately, interest rates in the United States, in the West, are going to go higher, because at this point, there's basically zero risk premium in the interest rate. And you could make a case where rates, as it is right now, rates should be 10, 15, even 20% to adjust for the risk factor of basically a default. And when I say default, it's either non-payment, which won't happen because they can print the money, or devaluation, which is what's going to happen.
What would you tell the common person to do? Is everything on sale right now with the buying power of your dollars right now? Whether it's a case of oil, an oil filter, a bag of cereal, a bag of rice, ammunition, I don't know, grease, lube, farm
everything.
Food. You need everything. What would you tell people to do?
Yeah, the first thing I would tell people is you need to protect yourself and your family, because no one else is going to do it. The government, if they come knocking on your door and tell you, we're from the government, we're here to help you, that's not true anyway. No one is going to protect you other than yourself. So what you need to do is, A, you definitely do not want to be in a highly populated area. You do not want to be urban. You don't want to live in a city. You don't want to live in even a suburban neighborhood. You want to get rural. You want to get out and away from population. Out and away from population means there's less people that can harm you or try to invade your space. Once you're rural, then you've got to start looking at how do I defend the position, and the position being you need food stocked up. You need the sources of water. You need sources of electricity. Myself, I grew up not a city boy, but definitely not rural. And I've got over 20 chickens out in my backyard now. I probably get a dozen eggs a day now. So a dozen eggs a day. There's protein. I have a pond that's stocked. Fish. Those are protein. You just need to do the best you can, and don't worry about hoarding dollars in a bank account, because those are going to go away. I mean, I would say spend your dollars on real stuff that you're going to need to use in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And like you're saying, an extra set of tires wouldn't be a bad idea, an extra battery, and that's assuming you can get gasoline. But if you're rural and you've got a well pump, buy another well pump today. You're going to need one. And one caveat with that: if you do buy a well pump, you do need to rotate that every 2 weeks or once a month. You need to roll the box over so that the oil can circulate. Otherwise, you're going to have a ruined pump. But buy spare parts for things that are going to break, because a year from now, 2 years from now, they're not even going to be available at any price. So do the thing, purchase the things that you're going to need and stockpile them. And if you don't immediately need it, and your neighbor who's a half a mile away needs it, you can use it for barter. So just all I'm saying is protect yourself, because no one else is going to do it for you.
Wow, that is so simple and yet so frightening. I had Martin Armstrong on, right? He flies all over the world. He's in demand all over the world. He had just had a conference in London. He had 35 countries represented. You know what I said? What would you do, Martin? He says, you need 2 years of food. I have it. I mean, this is Martin Armstrong telling people to have two. Martin Armstrong. He's hardly a tinfoil hat boob. He's brilliant, in demand all over the world. And what's he say? He comes down, you need 2 years worth of food. I mean, it's just stunning to me. I've had people write, well, that would be a hardship on people. No, it would be a hardship for you not to have food in year number 2. That'd be a hardship.
Right. Well, and you need 2 years of food for the amount of people that are going to be in your compound.
Yeah. Who knows how many? There's be a lot of people walking in, honey, I'm hungry, don't let me starve. I mean, right? What do? Feed them or shoot them? I'd say you're going to have to feed them. I guess. I don't know how bad this is going to get, Bill. We've never seen this before.
Well, Greg, when this goes down and someone's on your property that you don't know who they are you going to ask them, why are you here? And the shit house has already come down?
Yeah, well, it's going to be tough. I
think it will get to the point where it'll be shoot first and ask questions later. Woo. That's just my opinion.
Wow, that's some tough words. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying I'm trying to get people ready for how bad this is going to be. That's what this interview is about. And you're telling me that...
that's easy. That's easy.
Help me.
This is going to be worse than anything we've ever experienced. This is going to be far worse than the Great Depression, simply because society itself is far worse. I mean, back in the Great Depression, people lost, properties, lost wealth. You did have people going around hungry, but you did have neighbors that would help neighbors. And today, it's, neighbors neighbors are going to pick on vulnerable other neighbors like vultures, because that's where society is today.
Society is today. Where society is today. I did this thing in the wrap-up, reprobate minds. That people are reprobate, that they have no God, they have no morality. They're fooled. Right. They're, this is in Romans 1:21, 22, and I skip forward to 28. But, the rest of them are about all the awful, evil things you do, and God's going to give you a reprobate mind. But anyway, it says in Matthew 24, Jesus says that it'll be the worst time ever has been and ever will be. And that's what it's right. looking like. That's one hell of a biblical prophecy. If you take a look at, it's 2,000 years ago, and all of a sudden, how did he get that right? Now you're saying the same thing. I mean, the math is just, you can't work it out for it to have any kind of even remotely soft landing. We're going to fly into
right.
the mountain at 150 miles an hour.
Exactly. I mean, I have nothing to add to that.
Boy. Bill Holter, BillHolter.com. You also are a precious metals broker for Miles Franklin. Are you guys saying with this elevated price, and I'll just ask you this about the business, you don't tell me how much, but are you getting people that are wanting to exit dollars, big people that are exiting dollars and are putting it into metal?
Believe it or not, I'm going to say business, the actual quantity is probably about the same as it was a year ago. But a year ago, we probably got 2 or 3 orders for every one order we're getting now. We're getting bigger orders, but less.
The less amount of orders, less people ordering, but right. the people ordering are getting right. way more.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And after the banks had the problem in early 23, March or April of 23, we did go 2 or 3 weeks where we were taking orders for silver that we knew we owned, but we weren't going to have for 4 weeks or 6 weeks. It was getting shipped in from Australia, Vienna, wherever. And at this point, premiums are way down, and supply is good across the board.
This would be a good time to buy physical gold and silver bars, coins, that kind of thing. Because you can get it.
Yeah, I mean, the premiums are down, and it is available. And the day is going to come where, we'll be getting hundreds of phone calls a day and having to tell people we don't have access to metal. That's where this is going. And that's basically a failure to deliver. And human beings, their mindset is when you tell them they can't have something, they want it even more. That's just human nature.
In other words, you're going to be basically failed to deliver out of a job. You'll no longer have anything to broker, as you're a gold precious metals broker.
Yes, that's true, but the brokers will be the only supply because they have clients, and there will be some clients that are going to need to liquidate small portions to do this, that, survive, whatever. And that's assuming that there's a system that's up where you can actually transfer money. And
yes.
that there's actually a currency that could be confidently accepted. And that won't be dollars.
The price of gold in dollar, I mean, I'm trying to, when I say, what do you think the dollar price will be in gold? And you're saying, well, we may not even be using dollars, or at least not the Federal Reserve note dollar. We might be using a U.S. Treasury dollar. We might be using a new dollar.
Right.
A constitutional dollar.
In current dollars, let's say that they come up with a new currency where you give them 100 current dollars and they give you one, XYZ dollar, treasury dollar, whatever you want to call it. So basically you're getting, a reverse split. But in current dollars, the only question in my mind is how many zeros are going to need to be tacked on to the price of gold and silver and general commodities. I mean, how many zeros do you need to tack on to a cup of coffee to make that a fair exchange.
Wow.
Does it go from 3 to 30, 3 to 300, or just $5 coffee now? But that's what's going to happen when this snaps and goes parabolic. The dollar's not going to be accepted. So it could be an infinite amount of dollars. Won't buy anything because it's not accepted.
Whoa. Wow. It's an unbelievable situation we find ourselves in. Just buy stuff. Go out and make sure you're stocked up.
It's not unbelievable. It's not unbelievable.
Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't say unbelievable. I mean, it's.
Yeah, no. Watch this happen. We watched them do it. It happened on our watch. I mean, you, myself, plenty other commentators, bloggers, etc., have talked about it. But the average person, a question I ask people that are skeptical of buying gold or silver, I always ask the question, do you think the U.S. government is bankrupt? And at least 95% of the people will say, well, yeah, everybody knows the government's bankrupt, but it doesn't matter.
It does matter.
And the problem with that is it doesn't matter until it matters. And when it matters, everything stops.
Boy, that's a brilliant quote. People ask people, it doesn't matter until it doesn't matter. When it matters, everything stops. And that's what you have to watch out for. You have to be able to make it through the everything stops period.
Exactly.
Bill Holter, I'll put up your. Do you like me to put your email up? I'll put it up at the end of the thing. People like to contact you. Is that right?
Yeah, sure. You can reach me at billholter.com. There is a contact button, and my business email is bholter@proton.me.
I'll put all that up. What a great, just what a thought-provoking interview. And I don't mean to, and it's not like a sky is falling, we'll all be killed. It's like, here's the math, and the math sucks, right? I mean, the math.
Exactly.
It's just, it's a math problem. It's gonna. You think it'll go down before the? You think that now, because the economy is so bad, and this is my last question. You think this all goes down one way or the other? Under its own weight, or somebody's going to kick the legs up under the table? You think it goes down before the election?
Yeah, I do. I think there's better now than a 50-50 chance that there is no election.
Wow. I will stop right there. Bill Holter, thanks for joining us today on usawatchdog.com and letting me pepper you with all kinds of scenarios and questions. I appreciate you. Bill Holter of billholter.com. Thanks for joining us today again on usawatchdog.com.
Thank you, Greg.
Smoking is one of the most dangerous addictions in the world, and while you lie to yourself that you'll be able to quit any time, severe complications, often deadly, are quietly developing inside you. Unlike nicotine gums and patches, these hemp oil-based gummies don't just substitute your addiction, they completely eradicate it and repair the damage done to your body. Your cravings will vanish within just 1 hour after the first use. Within 3 months, all dangerous complications such as heart disease.
Send it to my phone, send it to my phone. You already know, I'll keep it on the low. Baby, you can trust.